We invite you to join the conversation using the open mic feature in our app and calling 877-625-1045. I'm Rich Jones, joined live by a couple of legal analysts. So one is Greg Pingree. He's a professor of law at the Florida Coastal School of Law, teaching tort professional responsibility, sexual orientation, and the law. And also by our legal analyst, Mark Rubin. Greg, I want to start with you, since obviously you do teach in the area of sexual orientation and the law. As we just heard that one man say, basically states' rights issues thrown out as a result of the Supreme Court. But I guess, does it go deeper than that, wider than that? Do you think that we could be dealing with other legal challenges that may be to come?
Well, certainly there are lots of possible legal challenges, but I really do think that that statement itself contains a lot of possibilities. The idea that states' rights will now be overrun. I have to respectfully differ with the gentleman who made the remark, because the Supreme Court is always in the business of having to make difficult judgments about whether and how far to get involved in matters that are normally and by design resolved at the state level. But sort of bottom line on this is just that Justice Kennedy and the other four who joined him believe that some things are too important to leave to the democratic process generally, or to the states individually. We've seen that throughout our history, obviously mostly in the area of slavery and race, but in other areas as well. And so Justice Kennedy went to a great deal of efforts to try and lay out the argument that this is something that has been carefully discussed, debated. It's had several decades to sort of percolate, and that the time has come to simply make everybody equal when it comes to how the government, as a secular institution, looks at marriage.
One of the many questions, Greg Pingree, that came up in the hours after the decision is what happens with churches? Will any religious institution be forced in any way, shape, or form to perform a gay wedding in the event that they do not want to do that based on religious beliefs, that there would be any sort of pressure in order to do that? The law is very clear on this.
Yes, the law is very clear on this. The answer to that is simply no, period. And it's always perplexed me that people think that somehow a Catholic priest is going to be forced by police officers to perform a marriage tomorrow. The Supreme Court and the Constitution are extremely deferential to religion. The Establishment and Free Exercise clauses, which I also teach about, are very ironclad, and churches get to do all kinds of things that otherwise people might not be able to do because they are churches. So having to perform gay marriages is not something that's ever going to happen. Now, if we look at something like, say, an affiliated school or hospital that has some connection to a church and receives federal or government funding, then there may be some debate about whether or not it's impermissible to discriminate on the basis of sexual identity when it comes to those entities. So perhaps some of the ancillary entities that are connected to religions, obviously we know Catholic hospitals are numerous. We know that there are a lot of schools and other programs that are connected to religions. That may be where the battleground is. But as to performing marriages within churches themselves, or anything that is central to the doctrine or practice of any of the parts of the church that are considered sacred and essential to its identity, no. The answer is simply no. That's never going to happen.
We invite you to join the conversation at 877-625-1045. Let's head to Jay in Jacksonville. Jay, you're on the air. Go ahead.
I believe that basically the freedom of religion covers the gay marriage. Just because one religion says that it's not okay doesn't mean that all of them do. If you want to open up a new religion, all you got to do is you go down and you apply for your new religious licenses to open up your own church, and you're done. You get your 30C certification. You can do gay marriage anytime you want. Doesn't mean that because we're in America. We might believe one thing one way for 10 different churches. The world is completely different.
Jay, appreciate the call. Appreciate your thoughts as we bring in our other legal analyst, Mark Rubin. That was certainly a storyline that we've been talking about in the days leading up to this. And really, Mark, as long as we've known each other, in the years leading up to this historic decision that came from the courts, because certainly opinions on the issue of gay marriage over the course of just the last few years, but especially the last 10 years, have changed so much. Florida's constitutional amendment, for example, less than 10 years ago, where more than 60% of Floridians voted to essentially say, no, gay marriage is not legal in this state.
Yeah, Rich, good evening. And you're right. The pendulum has swung from about 60-40 one way to about 60-40 the other way in terms of the popular belief, and that's a trend that we see in lots of different things over time as our society and our mores change. And so today's decision is not in any way a restriction on religion. In fact, the word marriage in many religions is by definition with an act that is performed between two people and recognized by the church or a temple and by God. That doesn't necessarily mean that another marriage where a religious issue is not introduced is any different in the eyes of the government. And that's really the distinction that we have here is that the people that are opposed to gay marriage, many of them are using a different definition of marriage than the one that the government sees. In the eyes of the government, as Justice Kennedy said in his opinion, everyone is to be treated equal. Everyone is to be treated the same in the eyes of the government, so that the privileges that you get from being married should be available to everybody, not just because they're a man and a woman under the definition of that's given by a church, but two consenting adults that are the same sex, if they want to use that definition to describe their union and have that relationship. And Justice Kennedy went very deep into his opinion about how it's important to know when one mate is with another one, how they can rely on that other one. That's the bond of marriage that he's talking about, but it may or may not have a religious overtone. So really, this whole debate that we're having now is about two different definitions of marriage, the way I see it. It's the religious definition, which does not, for many, does not include same-sex marriage, and then it's the definition of marriage that the government sees in the eyes of the people and the way it deploys political, social, and other environmental non-religious functions.
And it's those deeply held religious beliefs that for so many create such an issue here. And Bill joins us to continue the conversation at 877-625-1045. Bill, that transitions nicely, I think, into your call, because Mark Rubin, our legal analyst, is talking about the government and legal definition, and then there's what's in your heart.
Hi.
How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you today?
Good. So what's your initial takeaway from this?
Well, I had an interesting thing I found in the Bible here in Mark 25, and a young man is about to be married to his 10 brides, and in the end he only marries the 5 that remembered to bring oil for their lamps. The point being that the Bible condones polygamy, although it specifically forbids homosexuality, especially if you look at like Deuteronomy, where it commands that homosexuals should be burned at the stake.
Bill, I appreciate the call and the feedback. 877-625-1045. Mark Rubin, as we were just talking about, there's a deeply held religious belief that individuals will have, and then there's the government and the role of the courts here in this decision that came on same-sex marriage.
Yeah, and as I'm not 100% sure what direction that previous caller was going in, because it touched on a lot of different issues. But at the end of the day, we're trying to create a law that applies to everybody. And so whether you read the Bible or whether you don't read the Bible, in the eyes of the law, everybody should be treated the same. And that's really the message that came from here today. And then, of course, there's the political issues, because you've got 15 or 16 presidential candidates, some who are trying to appeal to the to the Christian conservative right, who were basically going out there saying, "Hey, we need to fix this by constitutional amendment." And let's be clear, this country is not going to have a constitutional amendment to go back to put the to put this back in the box. That's not going to happen.
We've moved too far.
Yeah, with 60% of the opinion, and now of the public in favor of it, and now with the Supreme Court putting their stamp of approval on it, the number's going to go higher. There's never going to be a constitutional amendment that's going to make same-sex marriage illegal. That's just not going to happen. So those candidates are simply trying to appeal to people that are going to vote for them with the fatalistic long-term outcome, because none of those candidates are ever going to be electable in a general election.
Professor Greg Pingree at the Florida Coastal School of Law. Do you see it the same way? Are there any legal issues or legal fights that states could possibly pursue here? Or is this an ironclad decision that basically, to a certain extent, no matter how you feel, you're going to live with?
Well, to connect to what Mark was saying, and I agree with everything that Mark has said, excellent insights. There's kind of a paradox between religion and the state in our country, because we were founded on the idea that we wanted to be free to practice whatever religion we wanted, and in fact, for the first part of our history, we imposed that in kind of a forceful way on others, and kind of duplicated the very oppression that we were escaping. It was after some time that Roger Williams and others obviously created a more diverse situation when it came to religion, and now, of course, religion has come to, the separation between church and state has come to mean not just that any religion is okay, but that non-religion is okay, that a religion is okay. One does not have to believe in a religion at all. And so, as Mark suggested, the foundation of this is that we have a government that is working as a secular institution that has the power to offer benefits, to offer protections, to do any number of things for individuals that come in a very large volume with the government-sanctioned rights and practice and licensing of marriage. And looked at that way, religion, while it may have some part in the tradition that led to that, of course it does. We can't deny that. Nonetheless, we are committed in America to the idea that while everybody should be able to practice or not practice religion as they wish, the government is not a religious actor. The government must stay out of that and must deal with people fairly regardless of those people's religious beliefs. And so in that sense, I really agree with Mark. Mark mentioned that there are two definitions of marriage, and one way that I always look at it, particularly when I'm talking to my students, is to ask the question, who owns the definition of marriage? Is there a reason to suggest that somebody should own the meaning of a word or an idea? There's no question that people of religious faith and sincere belief can always honor the religious tradition of marriage, treated as the sacrament or the ritual that it is, but that doesn't mean that it cannot also be used in a secular sense for important purposes for governing a very diverse, broad society.
President Obama on the Friday after the decision, just about an hour or so after the Supreme Court had ruled 5-4 to essentially uphold gay marriage as 5-4 the law of the land in America, saying the shift has been quick, shifts in hearts and minds as possible. The hashtag #LoveWins was trending on Twitter throughout this day, but still deeply held religious beliefs by so many, and so deep divisions.
I'm really happy about today's decision. I'm glad that gay and lesbian couples can get the same treatment as everyone else.
This Supreme Court is a mockery. I cannot believe that these justices have ignored the will of those conservatives that believe a marriage is between a man and a woman.
I mean, that's just a pro and con right there through our open mic. Feel free to join the conversation at 877-625-1045. We'll keep the conversation going on this special broadcast following the decision by the Supreme Court to legalize gay marriage.
You're listening to a special presentation of Breaking News. We break down the Supreme Court rulings on gay marriage with Jamie Dupree in Washington. Now, here's your host, Rich Jones.
Makes no sense to me to tell someone that they can't do something that's not harming anyone else.
Lindsay, following the reaction of a 5-4 decision by the United States Supreme Court legalizing same-sex marriage in all 50 states. In his dissenting opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts saying this court is not a legislature. Whether same-sex marriage is a good idea should be of no concern to us. Under the Constitution, judges have power to say what the law is, not what it should be. And yet, in the opinion of the majority, Justice Kennedy writing, choices about marriage shape an individual's destiny. The nature of marriage is that, through its enduring bond, two persons together can find other freedoms, such as expression, intimacy, and spirituality. This is true for all persons, whatever their sexual orientation.